Hello, in this video take a look at how we can optimize and construct our models to minimize texture distortion when subdividing. So if you are working with high fidelity film or cinematic models, you'll probably be dealing with a lot of subdivision. So what kind of things can we do when constructing the model to avoid a lot of texture distortion? So I'll just make a quick model here, and I will do various things. I will create various models with different construction techniques. So basically what I can do here is just make something that will demonstrate kind of some hard surface things may run into here. So for example, first we can have a curve right here. So what I would do is just say insert some segments through here. And so I'll just move this down. So this would be kind of a curve right here. Alright, and next I can insert some segments through here, and let's say I will select these polygons. I'll just delete this, go into border, use regularizer. There we go. Alright, so I will be using this kind of default model right here. Let me just clean up a little bit by moving these vertices up here just so it's a little bit more even here. Alright, and basically I will have various ways of constructing this, and I'll get back to once I've got that. So here I've got 7 models I'm going to test out right here. I'm going to pretty much give them all the same smart material. So the first one is a model will be subdivided using support loops here. So various artists have different terms for what they call inserting support loops here. Some call it fencing, for example, but I call inserting support loops here. So the support loops will create the sharpness right here. And so once I create the texture, I'm going to apply turbo smooth on this one right here, after we've come back from Substance Painter to subdivide this. This second model right here is similar to the first, except there's just more loops here. So there's more fencing and support loops happening here. And I'll also apply turbo smooth after we create the texture, 2 iterations. This third model is just using creases here. So after I create the texture for it, I will just apply open subdiv, and that's how we'll subdivide here. So pretty much without using support loops, using creasing right here. There we go, 0.2. So in addition to exporting these models right here that are unsubdivided, I'll also be exporting some subdivided models right here. So 2 iterations of this model right here, 2 iterations for this model, and 2 iterations of open subdiv for this one right here. So basically these are just the same as these 3 right here, except these have been subdivided here. And this third model here is basically using this right here, but with 1 iteration. So basically this right here is after it's been already subdivided. So this is the base geometry right here. However, what if we just have more base geometry at the beginning? So this is going to be the base object right here, and then I'm going to apply open subdiv on top of this afterwards and set up some creasing here as well. So basically, instead of having more simpler objects like this, what if we just have more complex objects with more geometry right here to better maybe minimize the distortion here? So which one of these techniques will offer the least texture distortion when subdivided is what we want to figure out. So here I've just applied 3 simple materials right here: plastic grainy, rust coarse, and skin face. So these 3 we'll not look at right now because that is subdivided. We need to look at that one subdivided. Let's take a look at these 3 right here. So with this right here, we can see heavy distortion happening right here. Right, for our next object right here, this is the one with more loops. This one right here, subdivided. And you can see also heavy distortion happening around here, but it looks like a little bit less around the cylinder area right here. And looks like with this object right here, we have close to no distortion right here. However, we still need to see how this looks when it's been subdivided in 3ds Max. So this is open subdiv creasing with 2 iterations, but we need to see how it looks like with 3 or 4 iterations. So if you look closely right here, this is not a result of distortion. This is actually the triplanar projection. This is the natural UV seams right here. And what we can actually do is increase or decrease the hardness settings to get a smoother transition right here. So if you notice, for example, it's too sharp right here, you can go ahead and decrease the hardness setting to kind of smooth it out a little bit. So maybe by default it's 0.5, you can go even lower. Alright, and this 7th object right here, we also need to see how it looks like subdivided. So if I switch to Rust coarse, you can see once again this object is looking fine. So you can see right here on the left, heavy distortion. But here on the left, close to no distortion right here. So having more loops going through does clean things up. You can see here at the top, I did not put a loop through here because I didn't want to ruin the curvature, and that's how we have this kind of bad distortion right here. So inserting more loops does indeed help with minimizing distortion. You can see how the cylinder area here, heavy distortion, but this one looks a lot better here. But we still have distortion happening right here. And with skinned face, we see some slight distortion happening right here on the cylinder, but the other areas look fine. Heavy distortion here, and on the edges right here. And heavy distortion happening here as well. But once again, with the extra support loops, this one is looking a little bit better. So let's go back into 3ds Max and see what this looks like when everything has been subdivided. So back in 3ds Max, I made 2 copies here. This is what I originally made, original export. So this is what has been textured right here. This is what the textures have been applied to. And this is just all the objects smoothed out to at least 3 iterations. So Turbo Smooth 3, Turbo Smooth 3, Open Subdiv 3, 3, 3 Turbo Smooth, 4 Open Subdiv, and 3 Open Subdiv. So I made the normal map visible in the viewport because that's just the most visible right here. Alright, so notice this object, heavy distortion here, with this kind of topology. And this object, once again, little distortion on the left, but a lot on the top right here. And you can see that I've inserted a loop right here, a loop right here, but not a loop right here, because I didn't want to ruin the curvature right here. And the extra loops did indeed reduce the distortion happening here, but there's still a lot happening around here. But there is a lot less at the top right here. So once again, these seams are not distortion, these are just the UV seams. This right here is the distortion that we want to avoid. So this is distortion, whereas this is just a UV seam. Alright. This object here is looking a lot better, but we still see a lot of distortion on the cylinders and here as well. So distortion causes the texture to stretch like this. Alright, looking at these objects now. Once again, we have heavy distortion, but it's a little bit less. Since remember, this object is actually subdivided with 2 iterations before the texture was applied. So if I actually compare it to this right here, you can actually see there is slightly less distortion on the right. So for example, let me focus on the top right corner of this detail right here. So notice that heavy distortion here. And the top right corner of this object, you can see there's a lot less. So basically, this was textured like this, and this was textured with 2 iterations. So it's the same object, but this one went into Substance Painter with 2 iterations Turbo Smooth. And you can see it actually does make a difference with the minimizing distortion here. So if you are going to use support loops, you should probably export with 2 or 3 levels of iterations right here, and that will help to minimize the distortion. Because you can definitely see it's looking a lot better in many areas. Alright, let's compare these objects. Once again, this was exported like this. This was exported with 2 iterations. Otherwise, it's the same object. You can see this one is heavy distortion, but less on the left and right. And this one is also just looking a lot less distorted here. So notice, for example, the top, right here, and then right here, it's looking a lot better. Alright, and then we get to these 2 objects right here. This one was exported with 2 levels like this, and this one is exported like this, but it's just heavier density here. Alright, I can actually activate flat so we can see it a little bit better here. You can see there's a little bit of distortion right here, whereas this one on the right has much less, or pretty much almost nothing right here around the cylinder. Some distortion right here, but it's very minimal here. And this one is practically no distortion. So based on these simple experiments, if you want to get the best result when you subdivide, what you probably want to do is make sure you have a minimal level of density right here. So remember, this only applies if you're making things for films. If you're making things for video games, this is a fine level of density right here, because you're just going to subdivide this and bake this into a low poly. So for example, this would be your high poly right here. And then for your low poly, you would just do this right here. And then you would get rid of the extra loops just by double clicking on this and removing, and let's say right here as well. Of course, deselect these edges because they make up the shape right here, so we don't want to remove them. Okay, and in order to clean this up, what I usually do is just select all this, grow, Control Shift and click to convert to vertex, and then just weld to a very high value here, and then just weld here. Maybe just remove this as well. So then weld right here. I'm just giving you a very quick crash course about how you can create a low poly. Now don't worry about the distortion here, because you would of course unwrap this afterwards. So you can use this level of density because you're just going to create a high poly and bake it into a low poly. So it's fine. However, if you're going to subdivide for film, you would want to have at least this level right here. So let's just compare these two objects. What you don't want versus what you want right here. So on the left here, it's just a little bit too simple. And when you create textures for this, whether using support loops or OpenSubdiv crease sets, this is still just too little. Although of course crease setting in OpenSubdiv works a lot better than using support loops here. So if I apply OpenSubdiv to both of them right here, give this, let's see, the iterations, you can see they both are pretty clean. They both have a minimal level of distortion, but the one on the right is a little bit better right here. So notice, for example, this right here, looking a little bit cleaner there. Around the cylinder, we have a little bit of stretching right here. And on the right here, very, very minimal amount. So that gives you a best practice situation right here, where pretty much what you want to do is make sure you have enough density right here to properly capture the shape right here. Whereas this one is just a little bit too simple right here. To have even less distortion, you can send this into Substance Painter, for example, and have all your meshes be at this level density, but probably this level is good enough right here. And this will allow you to produce a subdivision result for film and cinematics with minimal level distortion. Thank you for watching, and take care.